new CBA. In the last episode that I filmed about this, I did a whole episode saying like, I feel like they're getting closer. It seems like the two sides are getting closer. They're going to get a deal done. Adam Silver came out and he
can focus on our players in the union. We got a proposal from the league, which was honestly a slap in the face. And I think we really have to put an emphasis on the players that are in our league right now.
The WNBA might be heading toward the most catastrophic off-court crisis in its history, and few fans are ready for what could come next. Could the 2026 season vanish before it even begins? Let's find out together.
Editing, I saw the news that the WNBA players had authorized a strike when necessary. So just to get you guys up to speed there, 93% of the players participated.
The whispers began quietly, almost too polite to be alarming, but anyone paying attention could feel the temperature rising in boardrooms, locker rooms, and among fans across social networks. Even Rachel Demita couldn't help but talk about it on her YouTube channel, and when that happens, you know it's huge. What started as a negotiation over salaries and benefits has escalated into a moment that could decide whether the WNBA even takes the court in 2026. And that's a shock no amount of social media hype can soften.
In the vote, so 93% of players in the WNBA. And how many is that? Could we do the math? I believe that there's 166 WNBA players times 0.9.
As summer 2025 winds down and the offseason begins, negotiations that once seemed like routine CBA updates have spilled into public discourse in ways that are unprecedented. Players have not just talked about reforms, they have voted to authorize a strike, a tool that has never been used in the history of the WNBA. That alone would be headline worthy, but understates the magnitude of this moment. Although the league has pushed back assurances in press releases and public statements, the truth on the ground feels far more uncertain. Owners and executives are speaking about optimism, compromise, and shared goals, but the players' willingness to consider a work stoppage suggests that trust has eroded. That's not a subtle distinction, that's seismic. For fans who have watched packed arenas, record television ratings, and unprecedented merchandise sales, the idea that the league could grind to a halt without a 2026 season feels almost unthinkable. Yet that is exactly the scenario now being debated behind closed doors. The heart of the dispute revolves around how revenue is shared, how salaries grow alongside the business, and how the structure of the league reflects the reality of its rapid expansion. On one side, ownership groups emphasize profitability, sustainability, and investment in the long-term business model.
Voted. And 3 players, so only 3 players voted no to the authorization of a strike, which means the rest of the players said, if things start getting crazy, go ahead, you guys. You guys can call a strike and we'll just see where things go.
On the other, players argued that the league's revenue growth, fueled in no small part by the very visibility players have generated, has not translated equitably into compensation and protections that reflect modern standards in professional sports. This is not the typical push for incremental salary bumps. This is a fundamental challenge to how the league operates economically and culturally. And when you mess with the economic fundamentals, you mess with the existence of an entire season. Before we move on to the shocking details, smash that subscribe button and hit subscribe to get off the edge.
Crazy, go ahead, you guys. You guys can call a strike and we'll just see where things go. Now, I didn't get to go into depth about how I actually feel about this, and my initial thoughts is like, they're not really working right.
Because the drama is not contained in spreadsheets or executive memos. It spills into arenas, communities, and living rooms where fans are already planning their 2026 calendars around games, rivalries, and storylines that might never materialize if negotiations collapse. The irony is stark. A league that has fought for decades to capture attention now risks losing the attention because it cannot align internally on how to share its success. That is a bitter twist even the harshest critics did not expect. Players have been vocal about what they see as the next logical step for a league that has already outpaced its compensation structures. They want revenue sharing that scales with growth, facilities, and staffing standards that match the ambition of the sport, and benefits like parental leave, retirement security, and travel conditions that reflect professional expectations rather than compromises from earlier eras. What might sound to an outsider like a laundry list of bureaucratic demands is, to them, the difference between a career and a truncated one, between financial stability and constant uncertainty.
Players issuing a strike would definitely, I feel like, be more effective during the season, which would be wild if they did it during the season. But if you guys remember, like when Nafisa Collier came out and said what she had,
the league's public responses have been measured and optimistic, emphasizing ongoing dialogue dialogue and mutual respect, but measuring optimism in press releases is like gauging a storm by the sky at dawn. It may look calm, but the undercurrents can be treacherous. As negotiations continue, both sides have issued statements signaling confidence that a deal can be struck, but there are cracks in those expressions that attentive observers can read like headlines. But wait, because some of the tea leaking from union insiders suggests negotiations have reached points where certain key players feel they are not being heard. They are concerned not just about the specifics of salary caps or bonuses, but about respect for their role in the league's success. This is where labor negotiations always become existential, because it stops being about numbers and starts being about identity. When professionals feel undervalued in a business that demands their peak performance, resentment builds more quickly than any contract can be signed. Strikes are risky, they cost players paychecks, they cost fans momentum, and they cost sponsors confidence. But from the players' perspective, agreeing to a weak deal now could lock them into a structure that limits long-term growth at a moment when potential is highest. That's the paradox. The very thing the league has struggled to achieve, stability and growth, is now being threatened by the fight to protect that very future. Even stars with global visibility have weighed in carefully, recognizing that their influence carries both power and peril. A strike authorization is not a strike, but it is the strongest possible leverage short of a walkout. It signals unity, seriousness, and resolve. And unity is not easy to maintain in any professional setting, especially in a league as diverse and dynamic as the WNBA. And the fear that many executives quietly share is not just whether a strike might happen, but whether the public narrative around negotiations will erode the goodwill the league has built over recent seasons. After years of building momentum through historic media deals, explosive attendance, and star visibility that extends beyond traditional boundaries, all of that could be at stake if fans begin to see the league as unstable or uncaring, and that's where the stakes become truly existential. This is not about a temporary hiccup. This is about defining an economic foundation that may determine whether the league thrives, stagnates, or fractures. Players argue that being paid fairly while the league profits is not radical, but a standard practice in other major sports. Ownership counters that the WNBA's business model must be sustainable for the long haul, and that rapid increases could jeopardize smaller market teams. Both arguments have merit, which is why compromise is possible, but neither side wants to be the one who feels like they are losing leverage. Behind closed doors, league executives are reportedly discussing contingency plans, but those plans are not simple. Rescheduling, compressing a season, or operating without key players are logistical nightmares, and contingency planning itself signals that both sides are preparing for conflict, not harmony. Fans pick up on these subtleties. They notice shifts in tone, changes in interview willingness, and the rare moment when a player or executive slips into candor that feels more real than usual. Some of the discussions inside team circles suggest that players are privately debating what a strike would mean for them personally. Some see it as a necessary stand for future generations. Others worry about the financial strain, the loss of momentum, and the risk of alienating fans who are still new to the sport. This internal debate is not always televised, but it shapes locker room culture, preparation, and trust in leadership. One of the most surprising aspects of this moment is how deeply global eyes have turned toward the WNBA. International players, overseas leagues, and global fans are watching the outcome closely because they see the WNBA as a benchmark for women's professional sports. Successful resolution could set a precedent. A collapse could echo far beyond American courts. The tension also highlights something deeper about sports economics in the digital era. Fans once accepted labor disputes as part of the backdrop of major professional sports. But in women's sports, where progress has felt hard-won, the possibility of a halted season feels like a step backward. That emotional weight adds another layer of complexity to negotiations. But even in the darkest scenarios, there are voices calling for unity. Analysts, former players, sponsors, and even some owners have emphasized that negotiations must reflect the shared love of the game, not just economic calculation. They argue that women's basketball has finally earned its place in the national conversation, and that this moment should be about protecting that, not undermining it. And yet, the clock keeps ticking. The current CBA extension carries deadlines that look like a countdown. If a deal is not reached in time, the specter of a strike or even a lockout becomes real. Fans begin begin to wonder whether their season tickets will feel like time capsules from a future that never arrived. Sponsors begin to ask what guarantees exist. Broadcast partners start whispering about alternative programming. That kind of pressure fractures optimism. So the battle over the CBA is not just about money, it's about the soul of the WNBA and whether it can sustain its own growth without fracturing. And as 2026 draws near, the only certainty is that nothing is certain anymore. Let us know your views in the comments below because that matters the most.